So let's start going over the 5 powerful truths. All right. Statement number 1, strength is a prerequisite to power. So in other words, you must have you must have strength before you can have power. Right? And you cannot have power without being strong. So if you're not strong first, you can't be powerful. Right? So therefore, if we know someone is powerful, we know that that person, he or she, is strong. Right? And also, the thing that we got to realize here is a person who is strong can make themselves more tired quickly, and they can damage themselves faster. Right? So oftentimes if we have like 2 people, and let's just say we're going to make them do like an assault bike sprint, we have Grandma and we have Steve here, right? And oftentimes we're like, well, Grandma's going to, get way more tired from that assault bike because Grandma's out of shape, which in reality is the opposite. Like, she's going to do her 20-second sprint and be like, oh, that was not too bad. Like, I could keep going for like all day at that pace, right? Because she doesn't have the power to be able to actually create fatigue and damage to herself, right? Whereas someone who's extremely powerful, they can create that fatigue and damage much faster. So we just need to create kind of different work rest periods for 2 types of athletes, right? So it's one of those things when we kind of take someone and originally we're at a certain kind of work level and we progress them through, and all of a sudden now they're at they're stronger, they're more explosive. We have to give them less volume because they're stronger, right? And they respond quicker to a less of a dose. So it's something you got to think about and adjust accordingly. And I find that most people, if they're programmed for someone else, they tend to kind of project their own, whatever they do for themselves typically, onto their athletes. So for example, if I'm a more powerful person, I'm going to tend to prescribe rest work time. That's something that would be challenging or sustainable or whatever I'm trying to do for my athlete versus trying to give them what's appropriate, right? So we just kind of have to make sure we don't, kind of put whatever, we're experiencing onto our athlete. So obviously the opposite is true. If someone's not powerful, then we know that they're probably not strong, like they're probably weak, right? So that's something that we're going to have to work on in order to improve their power. All right. So we also need to look at the strength-speed continuum. So we have absolute strength all the way down to absolute speed, and kind of power would be right in the middle somewhere, right? So you can kind of see the different examples there. Something like a deadlift is going to be really slow. The bar is going to have really slow speed. Whereas something like sprinting, right, the person becomes the implement and they're moving really quickly and all those joint angles are moving really fast, right? So those are just completely different ends of the spectrum, and it's not right and wrong in terms of if we're using one of those or not. It's just, again, what does the athlete actually need and what are we preparing them for and how can we do that best and blend those different modalities, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. All right, so number 2, power must be always referred to in regards to time. All right, so if we look at the equation for power, power is always in respect to time, right? It's that force component, the strength, it's the distance that we move it, and then it's the time that takes, right? So something like a shrug, which has like 3 inches of movement, even if the person's using like 405, isn't going to be as powerful as something like maybe like a power snatch, where it moves all the way from ground over their head relatively quickly, even if it's lighter, like say like a 115 power snatch or something like that, right? So if we're talking in terms of the power, the distance, and the time it takes to do that's really important, right? So even if someone's moving a weight that's less, but they're doing that, in more reps in less time, or they're able to move through that range of motion quicker, again, it may, again, kind of in their specific context, make more sense to give them that option. Right? Number 3, training is speed specific. Velocity matters. So again, if we have 2 different types of athletes, say we have a powerlifter and a sprinter, right? The powerlifter, the only thing that they care about is maximal strength, right? The sprinter, the only thing they care about is maximal speed, right? In terms of them actually getting tested in their sport. So again, we just need to realize what we're actually preparing our athletes for, and then giving them the appropriate, prescription to be able to get there, right? So obviously the powerlifter is going to do more things that are going to involve strength because that's the quality that they need to drive up. Whereas the sprinter, they're going to, again, start to, especially towards their season, they'll get more specific, move more towards speed and actually maybe, kind of getting some overspeed and resistance training, kind of like sandwiching that on both sides. And you can kind of see like those are like basically 20 times different in terms of their speed. Like, maybe a max effort squat's gonna be like 0.5 meters per second. Like the sprinters maybe at 10 meters per second, something like that, right? Like getting that 100-meter dash in 10 seconds. All right. Statement number 4, power as well as speed and strength, because all those are on that continuum, are general qualities, right? So like, yes, the sport specificity matters a lot, but that's something that you really don't want to rely on year round, because that's something that especially depending on where that athlete is in their life cycle, especially for earlier on, like a younger athlete, we want to focus more general because we're going to have them potentially for a long period of time, right? Whereas if someone's kind of later on, they're kind of getting to the second half of the career, we might want to move towards more specificity, just because that we need to, peak them because they don't have much time left, sort of thing. So, I mean, again, with that, the biggest thing is just that we want to create sustainability and longevity with the athlete and not just try to peak them really quickly, right? So we do that through general qualities. Right? And a good example of this is something like, so if you take someone who's really strong, even if they only say squatted most of the time, and you had them do like an overhead press, they'll probably do pretty well at that, even though they rarely do that, like, barring like mobility issues and that sort of thing, right? But for the most part, that's going to carry over to other areas, right? So in general, it's a fairly, general quality. Right, number 5, adaptation of general qualities are driven in the off season, right? So when we're actually in season with the athlete, the only thing that we care about is that they perform well in their sport, their competition, right? And that we don't injure them and we allow them to actually do as well as they can. Right? Whereas in off season, we're going to drive those general qualities, where again, the biggest goal there is to, again, prepare them for the demands of their sport and to bring up relative weaknesses. And we're going to do that in a way that is that systemic change of those general qualities, right? And especially if we have an athlete for a longer period of time, we're going to focus on that.